Come on out. Come over here. Come to me. Come to me. You're okay. Come here. Come on out. Come on out. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV and everything that you do to help me keep this effort going. I really do appreciate it. Please do check us out on these alternative places because sometimes YouTube is a pain. And also, I'm trying to get the channel to 250,000 subscribers on YouTube and 10,000 on Rumble. So if you would subscribe and share the videos, I'd really appreciate it. Now, as you probably know, if you watched the previous video, I had an opportunity to sit down and talk with Chuck Michel from Michel & Associates and the California Rifle and Pistol Association about recent victories we've had in court for the Second Amendment. I wanted to find out if he thought the victories we've had with the Supreme Court could be overturned by a later court. So I asked him. You know, you mentioned the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court didn't view it the same way. They viewed it as an individual right and that the people get to decide with their wallets what they want to use. And the interesting thing about that is it's not really the Supreme Court that views it that way. It's our founders that viewed it that way. And the Supreme Court is just echoing that right. Intention. That said, we're coming up in a year and change here on another presidential election. How worried are you that we might not elect the right person and we could have the wrong justices, liberal, crazy activist justices appointed to that court and change the balance?
Yeah, well, that's probably the most important issue in the election. Obviously, you know, the Democrats and the Republicans have polar opposites of philosophy and policy, but the practical reality is that the president does appoint Supreme Court justices. Some of these justices are getting up there. And if Biden gets reelected, he's going to try his darndest to stack that court with judges who will not respect the Second Amendment. So vote, you know.
Because I think one of the most important things that former President Trump did was appoint justices to the Supreme Court, because without the appointments he made, we would not have the teeth back in the Second Amendment that we have.
Exactly.
But what you're illustrating is that those teeth could be quite temporary if we don't vote for the right person to get the right person in the White House.
They can be pulled. And we've got good judges in the circuit courts of appeal, too, thanks to President Trump. But the Supreme Court has the last say on these things. And we've got people that understand it there now, the majority at least. But yeah, they want to say that the Second Amendment doesn't protect an individual right at all. That it's all a state's right to a militia. That's the big split, and we got to hold on to that. So nothing is more important than, you know, I've said before, the Second Amendment is the tip of the spear of all our freedoms. You don't have the Second Amendment right. Look at what's happening in the First Amendment. I mean, if somebody doesn't like what you say, so they cancel you. I mean, this is what can happen with, you know, the tyranny of the majority or the more vocal minority who gets the platform on social media with the blessing of those platforms. So we're not safe. We're not safe politically, and we're not safe physically without a Second Amendment.
Well, we're in good shape at the moment in the sense that, like you say, the Second Amendment has had its teeth restored. But my concern, obviously, is the same as yours, is that if folks don't pay attention and they don't get out and vote appropriately, and we don't fight to make sure that our elections are honest and straightforward and safe, that could change, and it could change rather quickly in 2024. So we have to be careful about that.
So there's a lot of good groups in Illinois that are very much aware of this, activist groups. In my particular case, I was one of the four. We had Guns Save Life and FFL Illinois were probably the leading plaintiffs. There's also a shooting range and some individual plaintiffs. But those they all deserve an attaboy, along with all the other plaintiffs in the other three cases, because it was kind of a team effort there to educate the court and to bring home this win. But we now it will go up on appeal. We have to preserve this in the Seventh Circuit. And there's been a couple cases in Illinois where judges went the other way. Those will be up in the Seventh Circuit too. And so we really need to fight that battle and win that battle to hold on to this win. And so, shout out to the Second Amendment Law Center for folks supporting that. They'll be involved along with all these other groups once we get up in the Seventh Circuit and fight this there. And it may go to the Supreme Court. One of these cases is going to have to, whether it's Oregon or Washington State just passed something, or Illinois or California, someplace the Supreme Court's to have to set the record straight, because the courts are not unanimous in the positions that they're taking.
What is the Seventh Circuit like as far as its political leanings? I hate to say that the court is political, but we all know that it is. We look at the Nutty Ninth, or what used to be the Nutty Ninth, and we kind of used to know exactly which way they'd go. Is that the case with the Seventh Circuit? It's
better than it used to be. It's iffy. It doesn't have as many judges. It's not as big as the Ninth Circuit, but it's not as bad as the Ninth Circuit was. So we're very hopeful.
So that sounds to me like there's, it's not a slam dunk, this win. I mean, we could go to the Seventh Circuit and find ourselves back behind the eighth ball again and want to drag it up to the Supreme Court. Is that what you're saying?
Potentially. I mean, if you go by, and unfortunately it's sort of becoming the reality, you go by the judges' politics, which you can kind of tell by what president appointed them, and they vote based on those politics. If it strictly goes along those lines, and it doesn't always, but if it does, then, you just gotta, it's like a random selection of a 3-judge panel, and some of it is luck of the draw.
It sounds like we're having a lot of wins around the country. So I think that should buoy gun owners a bit, and when we've so easily been discouraged before.
Yes, people need to realize there is more hope now than there's ever been in the last couple of decades. And what's happening now is we're making history. We're making legal history. We're making policy history. It's the history of the Second Amendment that's at stake. And so folks need to be behind this and supporting this to be a part of that history by donating or getting involved politically or whatever, so that we continue to win.
Chuck, are you seeing that more people are getting involved, or are people just sort of checking out because they feel like there's no hope?
No, I think a lot more people are getting involved. And the key is that we've realized now, switching hats over to my role as the president of the California Rifle and Pistol Association, the local chapters that we formed are really making a big difference. All politics is local, if you remember that expression. And if you start down there with the Board of Education and the City Council and the dog catcher, that's what trickles up. And so if you influence it at the local level, it has a long-term impact. And because people see these chapter members, these gun owners, they don't, we're vilified and demonized by every major media outlet out there. And if people see that you're a real person and you have sons and daughters and mothers and fathers and friends and relatives, and you're a loving person who cares about other people, they suddenly have to take your arguments a little bit differently.
Chuck, so, I've seen, I'm an old guy, and I've seen states like Washington and Oregon, particularly Oregon, which used to be incredibly free, end up completely the opposite direction. In fact, I think those two states are trying to challenge states like California and Illinois and New Jersey and New York for the top tier anti-gun states. That's a heck of a swing. And can it swing the other way, I guess, is my question.
Look at Florida. I mean, Texas has gone back and forth a couple of times. Yeah, a lot of it is immigration, and not illegal immigration, just people getting the hell out of California and going someplace else. And they forget that they're refugees, not missionaries, and they try and bring their politics with them. But then if a conservative goes from California to Florida, now that state gets redder, and it's probably redder than it's ever been. So yeah, the states are in flux.
So you're a long time, probably a lifelong Californian. Do you feel like there's hope for California? I got to tell you, a lot of folks don't. I hear it all the time. I still live here. Do you think there's hope?
Not in a broader sense. There's hope on gun laws because of Bruen. There's hope that we are absolutely clawing back and going to get back our firearms freedoms in the state of California. They will still try to do everything they can to red tape your right to death. They will charge more for your permits. They will, put more burdensome regulations on retailers. They will, whatever they can do, whatever they can think of. There was 100 bills, just to use California example. At the beginning of this session, there was 100 bills. Now, between Rick Travis from CRPA and Sam Paredes from GOC and Dan Reed from NRA, they have gotten that down about a third. So there's like 60 or so bills now, but they have a bunch of spot bills. These are placeholders that they could charge up with firearms. So it's a constant fight. And the only thing that's going to stop rigged Sacramento from passing more gun control laws is more court decisions saying they can't. In the meantime, in a broader sense, California politically is just, they have DAs that don't prosecute people. They want to defund the police. The whole philosophy of social order and social management is, I don't know if there's hope for that at all. I don't think you're ever going to see a Republican. You're not going to see a Republican hold statewide office in California for a long time.
Probably not in my lifetime, I don't think. Which is a sad thing for me to say, but I think you're exactly right. What other wins can we expect in the near future? I want to make sure that we leave this on a happy note. We've got a lot of stuff going on around the country.
We've got 4 cases pending in front of Judge Benitez in the San Diego U.S. District Court.
Okay, before you go any further, what's up with that? Did he go on vacation for 6 months? We keep saying that's going to drop any day, but it never shows up. And I got to tell you, a lot of folks are just chomping at the bit. And,
I don't know. I would like to think he's just being thorough. He knows that his decision is going to be scrutinized with a fine-tooth comb. But it could be something simple, like he had a big trial that he had to clear the calendar for, and he couldn't get to writing this any sooner. You just don't know. I clerked for a district court judge after I got out of law school, and your calendar gets more or less busy depending on the caseload. You have more or less work, and sometimes you have a lot of work and you have to prioritize, and something that's already been argued and you're just writing up an opinion might have to go second chair to a trial where you have to pick a jury and put a guy on trial because there's speedy trial rights. So it might be something as simple as that. It's just calendar management, caseload management, combined with, I think he's trying to be thorough. So I don't read anything too much into his delay.
Frustrating, but patience, I guess, and perseverance along the way. What other victories we got coming?
Boland, the CRPA's case in California, striking down the ban on selling any handgun that isn't on the roster of approved handguns, and that meant basically unless you had microstamping, a loaded chamber indicator, and a magazine disconnect lock, you couldn't get a gun on the list. So the guns that were on the list were all 15 years old, and so we got a preliminary injunction in that case. That's now up in the Ninth Circuit, but that is much, I think, a clearer case because it deals with handguns, and Heller and Bruin both dealt with handguns, one in the home and one in public. But essentially what California has done is ban all handguns except the ones that have those 3 features. And that's a handgun ban. And so that's why the judge struck that down. And I think the Ninth Circuit's going to really have a hard time finding a way to uphold it. So
what happens is, do you think that the Supreme Court at some point is going to hear a case on the semi-automatic long guns? It just strikes me that they're going to have to. They've got to clear this up.
There's a petition to the Supreme Court right now from one of the Illinois cases, which it's for emergency relief. I don't think it has very good chances of being heard, but that won't really mean anything. Won't mean that they don't want to hear a case on this. A lot of times they don't take a case until they prefer to take cases where there's a final judgment rather than a motion on a ruling on a preliminary injunction motion. But there's other issues. It's the same thing. Ban guns, ban people, ban places. And so you've got, can you ban all marijuana users from possessing a firearm? Can you ban nonviolent felons from possessing a firearm? Can you ban, all these classes of people? There's one right now about nonviolent felons that the Supreme Court has been asked to take because they lost in the Circuit Court of Appeals. And the government is asking the Supreme Court to set things straight. So we kind of don't want them to because the Circuit Court ruling will stand. But we'll see what they do there. And there will be it's not, it's impossible to really say whether a type of gun ban or a type of person ban or a place sensitive places type ban will get there first or be accepted first, but something has to be, because the court is not going to put up with the shenanigans that the circuit courts of appeal played with Heller, where they twisted the test and came up with this basically a way that they could justify any decision they wanted. So I think Bruin made an effort to set that straight. Say they said the courts were applying a two-step test. The Bruin court said that's one step too many. You're going way overboard. This is not the proper way to evaluate these cases. But they're still trying to play games with that. But I think Bruin has shut some of that down. Some courts are still trying to get away with it, and I think the Supreme Court is going to be in a hurry, much more of a hurry than they were after McDonald, because that was 12 years, or Heller. I think they're going to take a case sooner rather than later.
It's interesting that that there's so much of this that needs to be, this sort of foundational work needs to be done for the Second Amendment. Was it just never done before, where there wasn't a body of case law to protect the Second Amendment that was built up over the decades? Did we just work on other things?
There was some cases, but there was really only one Supreme Court case, the Miller case, which was somewhat ambiguous in what it exactly meant. Didn't really definitively decide whether the Second Amendment protected a fundamental individual or a collective militia right. So there really was no, there were lower court decisions, but there was no Supreme Court, the case that matters, the court that matters, that sets everybody else's mandate. There wasn't something like that at the Supreme Court. So Heller and McDonald and Catano and Bruin are the four big cases.
No, I'm sorry. What was Gaetano on? I don't know what that one was, or however you say it.
That was the Massachusetts stun gun ban. That a woman was prosecuted for possessing a stun gun, which Maryland had said are illegal, and the court said no, that's an arm, because it's not just firearms; it's arms, which could be a billy or a knife or a stun gun or tear gas or whatever, and armor too, defensive armor. But the Supreme Court, in a per curiam decision, in other words, they didn't really do an opinion. They just nine justices voted unanimously that you can't ban stun guns. So they struck down that law because they're in common use. They estimated that there were 200,000 of them possessed across the country, and that's enough to establish common use. So there's at least a minimum threshold. If you have more than 200,000 of a particular type of gun in common use and possession of people, that's common use.
Well, you certainly got more than 200,000 ARs around. You certainly got more than 200,000 semi-automatic rifles if you just group them all together around. Right. You certainly got more than 2,000 magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. I mean, there's millions. Right?
There may be hundreds of millions of magazines, and there's at least 20 million, more than 20 million semi-auto rifles. So yeah, we're way over 200,000 when it comes to common use of semi-auto rifles and standard capacity magazines.
Well, and AR-15s, there's got to be, it's become, they don't call it America's rifle for nothing. I mean, the stupid thing is so common and so popular.
Right, because it's the platform. This is what they're confused about. They think that there's, the judges who don't know guns think an AR is, there's this AR and that's how every AR is. No, there's a million different variations on an AR platform. And so
I have an AR in 300 Blackout. I have one in 450 Bushmaster. I have one in 6.5 Grendel. I have one in 5.56. I have one that's set up for varmint hunting that's got a really long barrel and a great big, right.
Really, the AR is only this big. The AR, it's just right. It's the lower,
Yeah.
You want with it from there.
Thank you again for watching the entire interview. I'm very grateful. Please do like and subscribe and share the videos. Maybe they'll help somebody else. And if you'd like to support GunGuyTV at all, you can do that by going to GunGuyTV Crew at either Locals or Patreon, or just go to GunGuyTVCrew.com. One way or the other, it'll get you there. Thank you again so much. Have a wonderful week. And wherever you go, whatever you do, be safe.